So I'll pause a lot in this video, I guess, and just share my thoughts, I guess. Sure, yeah.
This is a completely unexpected mini Draft Kingdom. We're only doing this because Fnatic's draft was so bizarre and it makes no sense.
I don't think it was that bad. I think their draft was like a oh shit draft, you know? The draft wasn't good, but it wasn't like a bad draft. If you give the context of this, like if your carry top is playing carry tops and he's choking on stage and nervous as fuck, and he's like, a useless carry top is more useless than a useless tank top. Do you see what I'm saying? What kind of saying? You can see what I'm saying? So if I pick like Camille or Fiora top and he's like 0-5 and he's behind, he's less useful than a tank who's 0-5, right?
Let's go, man.
So I think that's the way their draft was bad, right? But I can see why they did it. Also, he's against one of the best top laners in the West. Like it's also like if your top laner is struggling really hard in the first 2 days and he doesn't even have a single kill and he's playing carries, then I think playing something like Sion or Ornn is fine, to be honest. Like he obviously is nervous. Just to get him a bit of confidence, you know? There's more than just champions when it comes to pro play, I think. But he's right, like the draft was not good.
Week of
not that. I don't think it was that bad, but yeah.
Please see, this is Fnatic versus Vitality.
That's including outside.
Now, one of the things that I'm going to say right immediately out the gate is that some of the bans by them don't really make any sense. Unless they think that, you know, they would last pick Annie or even like flex pick Annie, etc. Because I think there's a lot of power picks. I think that some of the bans by Red Side here, or the only thing that I would say is not super great, is probably the Aurelion Soul. I think that Varus is really flexible. I think that Caitlyn is also, you know, answerable.
So the reason they banned Aurelion Soul is because they banned Annie, I believe. Maybe I'm wrong, but also Perks was playing Annie. And I think when you have, like, Annie is a really good champ when it comes to setting up your jungler. I think it's just so broken to flex it on Red Side and to set up your jungler. And when you have Bo on your team, I think flexing Annie is not a bad idea.
But again, you'd have to play like certain things to answer.
I don't actually hate their bans. Photon Jace, Draven to make sure bot lane's not volatile, and set up mid jungle. Don't hate it.
Caitlyn, and end up nullifying her, and I just don't think that really plays to like maybe what Vitality wants to do. Like for instance, like B1 Caitlyn, I think instantly loses to R1 R2 Lux Seraphine. With Seraphine retaining flex into mid lane, but obviously we're not going to get stuff like that out of Vitality, so it doesn't matter. Okay, so the Caitlyn's by the way. Okay, so Fnatic open with B1 Ashe. So B1 Ashe has a theme. Ashe has poke and she has pick. Those are her two archetypes.
She has pushing lane. That's really important as well.
Now, the really bizarre thing is that the opponents, aka Vitality, they respond with Gragas and Xayah. These are two champions that are really known for their disengage ability. Xayah is also known as a vacuum answer to, obviously, Ashe, right? In the sense that Xayah can just dodge her ultimate. Xayah, especially with her range inside of laning phase, the way that Xayah can actually lane.
If Xayah is dodging Ashe ult, then I think she just takes cleanse. She doesn't ult to dodge Ashe ult, personally. I think Xayah ult has to be used a lot more flexible in fights. Xayah just takes cleanse against Ashe. I think every AD carry takes cleanse. Like, that's your band-aid against Ashe ult. It's not Xayah ult. I don't think Xayah is an answer to Ashe because of her ult. I think Xayah is an answer to Ashe because you can play Xayah Rakan and your mid-game is just a lot stronger. Especially if they don't get ahead. Like when you pick Ashe on like this, you have to play to win lane. Like you have to get, like if you're playing Ashe support, you have to have them under tower and you have to have a minimum like 15-20 CS lead in a plate and bot push into Drake. Like your strong side is bot the second you pick Ashe and your bot lane has to win.
It's relatively good, and even if Ashe ends up going support, so the Ashe's ultimate is up more frequently than Xayah's ultimate, it's still the main point does end up.
The counter argument you can say is, well, if you're taking cleanse against Ashe and she has low ult cooldown, maybe Xayah ult will be used as an answer to Ashe because you know her cleanse on cooldown. But that's not really where it's vulnerable. I think the ult will not be used for it anyway. More so like a team fight orientated. I guess the picks are possible, but
remaining unless you're going to do like really advanced dances and whatnot.
Not on the AD carry, let's say. It's more on the mid laner. Ashe is more better at like making picks on the mid laner.
Two champions that flourish at getting dove into and doing disengage, right? That is what these two champions really, really, really like.
Ashe is also OP for tracking jungle.
Whether or not they can do other
really
things,
OP
like
for tracking
typically
jungle.
sometimes Gragas is used as an engaged champion, sometimes historically been coupled with like Nocturne and these other types of things. Normally, he's really known for his disruption and his disengage, and he's known for just being very solid. He's able to go into multiple different roles, and that makes him very difficult to draft against when he's picked early. He can go jungle, he can go mid, he can go top lane, and he can be a neutralizer. And so that's really good. Yep. So now knowing this, you would think that Fnatic, Ashe has the poke. She has the long range. You might think that, well, okay, what does Xayah really hate playing against? Xayah really hates playing against poke and
she really
long
does,
range, if that is the entire...
Oh, Wunder's here. Yo, what's up, Wunder? Gragas sucks. Aren't you a Gragas connoisseur, Wunder? Aren't you a Gragas enjoyer?
...theme of the team composition, right? So what does Fnatic end up doing? Well, they end up going Vi and they go Zeri. Okay.
Yeah, I personally think Vi Zeri is not great. Like, I think Zeri Ashe is not that good of a lane, and I think maybe you have to pick something with more push. And honestly, I would prefer Jhin or something than Zeri. I don't know. Vi and Xayah is also suicide. Like, I just think Xayah Rakan. So I think I've talked about this on the cast before. So the reason Xayah Rakan is now really popular, some people even do Xayah Rakan on 1-2 if Gragas is banned. DRX started doing it, and now the LCK started doing it, and now Vitality is starting to do it, and now EU is starting to do it more. Like Xayah Rakan 1-2 just feels so broken in the mid game. And I think it's because range support AD carries got nerfed, like Kalista, Caitlyn, Varus, Ashe supports got nerfed. So Rakan doesn't get as punished. And the LPL answer to Xayah Rakan right now, I think, is Nautilus. But it's kind of hard because what happens is if you pick Xayah here, you can't really blind Nautilus. And what you'll often see happen in drafts in the LCK is if they don't pick Rakan, then they'll pick like Braum into Nautilus, best case, and that's why teams dodge it, so they don't pick Nautilus. And then what they'll do is they'll pick Rakan and ban melee supports, and they'll ban like Nautilus Jax or something.
Okay, so
personally, I think what they should do here is they should either do Jhin Sivir. Maybe. I don't know. You don't pick Vi either. Maybe Jhin Sivir is like a Sejuani or something. Something like this may be better. I don't know. Just makes your comp a bit easier.
Immediately now make up your mind. Are you trying to hard engage and have a pick composition with your Ashe and your Vi, or are you trying to scale? Because if you're trying to scale, the Zeri pick makes sense. If you're trying to have a pick composition, the Ashe and the Vi make sense, at least in their own world. However, it doesn't make any sense when you're staring down a Gragas and a Xayah. The Gragas and the Xayah already flourish at getting engaged on. They want to be engaged on because it activates their biggest strengths. It activates Xayah's ability to kite backwards. It activates the fact that she's going to root you with her abilities.
Like crazy.
It activates the fact that her ultimate then has increased value as the game continues to go on. So why did you just pick Vi when Jarvan exists as a pick and is able to do everything that Vi is able to do except do it better, and at least Jarvan...
Wait, LS is preaching Jarvan? What the fuck, LS? What happened? Normally you are always on the poke and enchanter train. I feel like if this was LS I know, it would be like Seraphine here. It would be like what is some Ivern, you know, like he would want like a Ziggs, like he would want what else does he like? He likes Zoe as well. Like he likes range, poke, disengage, enchanter. Jarvan can work, yeah, if you flex. The only way Jarvan can work is if you flex it, I think.
Jarvan's able to lock down Xayah.
Xerath he likes,
doesn't
Vel'Koz,
make any sense.
I feel like.
So now already we're seeing inconsistency in Fnatic's draft. Their champions are not agreeing with one another in draft. Their champions don't agree with what they're trying to do. And for anyone that uses the idea of bridging as a concept, it doesn't actually work the way that people, when they do draft analysis or talk about drafts and stuff like that, it doesn't actually properly translate. The idea that you should draft a non-congruent champion in order to achieve something or balance out a draft, it doesn't make sense when it's so far off theme. You can draft something that is still in the theme of what you're trying to do. Okay, so an example of this, right, would be like Victor is obviously known for his ability to be very good at disengage, but he's also known to be able to poke because he has his long-range laser. He's a very interesting and unique control mage, right? So he's able to fill into different types of archetypes.
He's just a shit champ.
Now, if what they're trying to do is have a scaling AD carry that is also able to play with the poke and the pick or something like that, they could do something like Ezreal. Now, Ezreal typically still would not want to be accompanied with the Ashe and the Vi because because that is not a champion pairing that you would normally find with one another, but it would still be within the realm of consistency of what Fnatic would be trying to achieve. So it doesn't make any sense when the Zeri ends up getting picked. The R3, you already know that it's coming. It ends up being Rakan for Vitality. Okay, so you already knew that the Xayah Rakan was coming, and you opted into what you did anyway. So now you have a scalingless Zeri accompanied with two champions that are activating what the opponent's R1 and R2s are basically dreaming. I mean,
some of the things you're saying, I agree.
This would be like queuing up for an MTG Arena game, or maybe a Hearthstone game, or a Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Masters game, or a Pokemon Online game or something, in literally getting to play against the deck that you hard counter. It doesn't make any sense. It's even...
Okay, like, I love LS, I do. He like makes the wildest analogies. Basically what he's saying... is you're picking Vi into Xayah. Very bad. Okay. Vi press ult, Xayah press ult, Vi die. Bye-bye.
Even more so bizarre when League of Legends drafting is a face-up complete information game. The only way to deceive or hide any of your information is via flex picks. And that's why flex picks obviously hold a lot of value. That's why Gragas is very good. That's why Jarvan can be really good, because Jarvan's able to be multi-flex. That's why Karma historically has been very good in draft. It's why Jace has some value in draft. It's why champions like that can be very good. It's because League of Legends drafting is face-up. It's complete information. And the only way to kind of alter that is via flex picks. But even then, the flex pick is still known that it has the possibility to be a flex pick. On R4, Azir ends up getting picked. Now, this is still consistent. I don't like, obviously, the idea that Vitality go for Azir here. It is blind, and you know that Humanoid likes to play control versus control. But still, I didn't like it in that regard. However, it is still consistent.
To be honest, I kind of like Jax here on 4. I'm not sure if they don't want to blind mid, but I think like if you take in your opponent into account, right? If I was the coach of Vitality and I was looking at this Fnatic lineup, right? You look for weaknesses in their team, okay? And what's the weakness in Fnatic right now after the first 2 games you saw? Well, Oscar is playing pretty bad, and it looks like his lane phase is really weak, and he's struggling. So okay, you can say there's a lot of weaknesses, but what's the biggest weakness? I think it's the biggest weakness right now is top. I don't think anyone can doubt that. So what you do as a coach, just counter pick top. Just give, like, you have the best top lane in the league, and they might have the worst top lane in the league. So just counter pick top, right? And this is a nuance that some people overlook when it comes to drafting, because you're drafting specifically against the people you're playing against. And if you're like in a vacuum where nameplates are off for everyone, then of course the draft will look a lot different, right?
It is a champion that flourishes against getting engaged on. It is a champion that is anti-engage. It is a champion that can also be somewhat anti-pick in the sense that he can throw out his wall in the event that he's getting picked, and he can, potentially separate some of the opponents. So Vitality's draft is still really, really, really consistent. I was saying before the game that I wasn't going to launch any bets on the game because I thought that all the odds were so terrible. But by this stage of the draft is already so one-sided, and you can tell that Fnatic have no idea what they're actually doing in the draft phase, that it makes it glaringly obvious that the team they're not even aware of what's happening. Now, most teams in the world don't actually properly draft, and I constantly say this. People always show up to my stream, they'll show up in YouTube comment sections, they'll show up on Reddit threads, etc., and they'll say, well, what team does draft good? What team does draft good? And a lot of people will just think that the team that wins ends up drafting good. The reality is that if you go to any region right now, LCK, LPL, LEC, LCS, whatever, almost no teams are drafting in...
I think T1 is drafting really well. I think G2 is drafting really well. I think Hanwha Life can draft well, but they're like, you can target them quite easily, for sure.
Response to what the opponents are showing. This is why I arrive at the conclusion that no team is actually drafting. Now, you can arrive by...
Guys, you guys are living in the past. Like, T1 drafts... Do you guys know T1 drafts? You know when the T1 drafts mean was? It was before Worlds. It was summer split. After their insane run in spring, their red side T1 drafts in summer were dog shit. Then Bengi came in and their drafts at Worlds were better. And now this year, their drafts just feel like... I don't know, maybe with the support meta changes, it's going to be hurt a bit. But their drafts were a lot better this year, I have to say. Like, they're definitely cooking on bot. I think they were the first to play out Gragas and stuff like this. So they're definitely like figuring things out a lot better this year. So you can't just say T1 biased, LCK frog,
by having a winning draft, regardless of your ability to assess what is happening inside of the draft, and then making adjustments or, doing certain champion picks in response to what you're seeing, etc. However, with what's going on right now, Vitality are hard winning the draft because Fnatic is inconsistent.
I think EDG drafts well as well.
Now,
I like
Fnatic,
EDG, I like the way they draft.
Completely blunder even harder. They end up going LeBlanc into the Azir, and then they go Ornn. So now it's make up your mind. Are you trying to scale, and that's why you have Zeri and Ornn, or are you trying to do some sort of early game shenanigans and have some sort of a weird pick comp, and that's why you have LeBlanc? Why are we blind picking the Ornn in top lane when already our bot lane is inconsistent and the Gragas is still retained?
Well, I think what Fnatic realized in this draft, their draft overall in cohesion, it's terrible, but they realized we have Ashe Zeri lane into Rakan, so bot is our only win condition right now. So we need to play strong early mid jungle so that they can play to dive bot. That's basically their plan, I think. They can have kill pressure on Azir early, and then they can use that pressure to go bot and hopefully get Zeri Ashe ahead and stack Drakes, because they realize that's the only way they're winning the game. So they need to blind pick a top that won't fucking int, and they pick Ornn. I think Sion works better as well, but it's just comfort. The thing is, there's so many nuances. Performance, strengths and weaknesses of teams versus the team you're playing against. Comfort, all these things are just important, right?
Flex to some degree with
if you can play Ornn at a 9 out of 10 and you can play Sion at a 6, I'll always put you on Ornn. There's no point of just dropping performance level just to slightly optimize something that fills the same hole. They definitely lack a bit of direction here. I mean, if they want to play, I kind of get it. I just think they fucked up here, and this is their way of fixing it, and it's just. But even then, I don't even think the reason Fnatic's losing is drafts. As much as we're talking about Fnatic's drafts, and I'll watch their game in a sec, I just don't think draft matters. I just think that, the draft really doesn't matter.
Or jungle and top
lane. At one
lane.
point, draft
why do you have
is
a
just useless.
In this team composition with two champions that actually hate her existence inside of the game? Nothing makes any sense whatsoever with Fnatic's draft. In a situation like this one, they should realistically just be looking for champions that are going to either pick or add something to the poke. Now, a champion that would... I
mean, LeBlanc is a poke champ on Xayah. If you can W forwards on a Drake fight off the side and QRE and get her ult, you're functioning as a poke champ kind of.
Do that without inducing any sort of magic resistance or something while playing against Xayah's theme would be Corki. And I know that a lot of people don't want to see that Corki is one of the better champions for what is going on, but unfortunately Corki is the reality.
Not bad.
Another champion that would still be consistent with what they're trying to do, but obviously you're never going to get it out of.
The problem with picking Corki is you lose your pressure, your kill pressure in mid. Azir is 100% safe against Corki. So that means that your bot lane is more in a 3v3. When in draft, you could optimize it into a 4v3 if you play well, if you pick LeBlanc. Vi, get an early flash mid, game plan can be good.
Because now Akali is going in with the Vi and with the Ashe and trying to do something. But again, even Akali wouldn't make any sense because they're showing you Gragas, they're showing you Xayah, they're showing you Rakan, they're showing you Azir. Now Akali is a vacuum answer to the Azir, ends up making sense.
Akali into Gragas Rakan is suicide.
However, when you entertain the entire picture, the Akali still doesn't make sense. So you're left with a limited range of mid lane options. You need a champion that's able to do something against the 4 champions that Vitality end up having while still being able to synergize or pair somewhat well with the champions that Fnatic has already picked. Now, you can do some weird things like Karthus mid lane or whatnot. At least that way you're able to offer the R
by
and you're
Azir,
able to play something in mid. Or you could do something
also, Karthus
weird
versus
like
Gragas is actually kind of bad.
If you're doing Kassadin, why do you have the champions that you have?
You can't pick Kassadin because you have such if you have to understand, I can't stress this enough, if this bot matchup goes even and you don't get early Drakes, Xayah Rakan just kills your whole team. They need to be under tower, poked, calling for jungle. This just has to happen.
Have above, but again, it's in the same line of thought that what is there to really do? You could do Twisted.
Why do I go on Reddit? I'm sorry, bro. I hope things turn around, man. I really do. I'm sorry, bro.
Fate, but the problem is that in the current dynamic of Twisted Fate versus Azir, Twisted Fate is.
The thing that I hate the most. I just saw someone write it. I'm getting one guide. It's you just outrange them. Okay, you can go even. Just make sure you just outrange them. Just outrange them, dude. Okay, just don't get engaged on. Just don't let Rakan flank you. Just don't walk into Dragon Pit. Just dude.
Isn't going to be doing the type of things that he was once known to do, even though Twisted Fate does have some value, I think, currently in mid lane. Other types of champions that might be able to do this would be something like Yone, but again, you're running into Xayah. So you have a limited range of options. You could do something like Vel'Koz or Corki. I think that those are probably the 2 best champions that would be able to do anything in a situation like this. But you are really limited. Obviously, the LeBlanc, though, just makes...
I mean, if Oscar was playing good and they have confidence in top, they could just do like some Ari Nar here. And I think it's not the end of the world. I mean, they get outscaled, but it's playable.
Literally no sense whatsoever. Another champion that maybe they could pick would be Ari. There to follow up with the Vi and with the Ashe, Ari not being banned away. You would be able to lane against the Azir, but again, you are running into Gragas, you're running into Xayah, you're running into Rakan. And that's why I think that realistically, one of the only options that you have available to you is probably Corki. Another champion that would maybe be available...
What is this? The editor just showed someone's Twitch comment, Eminem being quiet since this dropped, not gonna lie.
To them would be something like Veigar, but the thing is that when you have Veigar, you incentivize Merc Treads, and when you incentivize the Merc Treads, your Ashe also ends up getting hit as a byproduct of this, and then you also have an Ornn in top lane who will end up getting hit by some of the itemizations that the opponents can end up having. So even a champion like Veigar, who might end up being okay in a situation like this, is not really okay, but that doesn't mean that you necessarily had to go Ornn. You could easily go Veigar in a spot like this, and then you could change up your top laner, but I think that these are things that obviously are never crossing the mind of Fnatic whatsoever. So, with that being said, Fnatic's draft makes no sense, pretty much across the entire board. It makes it very awkward, but you can just clearly tell that, you know, that they're not really thinking about what they're doing. If they do something like Veigar and then Gangplank on B4, B5, it begs the question of why did they end up B1ing, B2ing, you know, Ashe and Vi? Because the champion themes that end up beating these champions are nothing like what they draft in the early stages. Now, if Fnatic, for some reason, end up having something like this, you know, in response to what the opponents picked, well, now you have a very different makeup. So if you have Ziggs being retained as a flex into mid lane, you could also have Ziggs against Azir. The Jarvan is probably never going bot.
But Ziggs Jarvan is not that good against Xayah. It's kind of like playing Ziggs Jarvan is like a budget version of Camille Galio. Like Xayah is really fine against Ziggs Jarvan.
Bot lane as support here, but he does retain the ability to go jungle and top lane. Very unlikely that Jarvan would obviously ever go mid because that's reserved right now for Ziggs.
Because your whole I think a silver player knows that Jarvan presses R and then Ziggs presses R, right? I guess the only benefit is Ziggs has poke, but Ziggs is just a really weak champion. I think Ziggs has. I feel like mid laners right now either have high DPS, high burst, or they can build Roa. That's just it. I don't know if Roa Ziggs is useful. I guess he has to go Liandry's, but I think this champ's not that strong. It's good wave clear, I guess.
But you could get Ziggs 80 carry. Ziggs would pair...
If you go Ziggs 80 carry, you really need the problem with playing Ziggs 80 carry is when you play a mage mid, you really need a really hard carry top, AD carry top, like let's say Jace or Camille. And you also need, or you need some kind of AD carry mid. Because if you're playing like Ziggs Victor, random example, your game is really hard because your two carries are like mages. You don't ever really want to run double mage carries. It can work if you have like GP, for example, let's say, as an example, playable. But again, the nuance of your top laner struggling and having to put him on a tank to band-aid your situation up there means that you can't do that, so Ziggs sucks, right? In a vacuum, if this was another team, maybe it's playable, you know? Maybe you can play... maybe you can play Ziggs because your top laner can play GP, but
with Ashe in terms of his ability.
But the nuance of out of game stuff is really important in draft.
To poke inside of the laning phase, and then he's able to be left alone on an island and allow Ashe to basically go elsewhere or look for like the close range arrows on mid lane roams, etc. And then in the later stages of the game, Ziggs and Jarvan have a lot of synergy and a lot of follow up. The archetype of these champions does somewhat better answer what exactly Vitality are doing, and maybe the Azir pick doesn't end up coming through because Ziggs is able to be flexed into mid lane. In the event that Ziggs would be flexed into mid lane, then you would end up, you know, getting your pick of the litter on ADCs that would look a lot better. Maybe you do...
I think the bans would look different, though. If you pick Ashe, Ziggs, and pick a 0-on-4 on purpose, and you're building towards a 0-on-4, and they ban Ezreal Sivir, you're having to play Jhin, Jarvan, Ziggs, and you can just open.
Something like Ezreal. Now at this point, you've now pivoted back to like a poke and like not really that much of a pick team composition, in which case your Jarvan is probably going to do things like R and then EQ out, rather than doing EQ into R and trying to trap the opponent and then, you know...
Oh, I just hate this. Like this image right here of these three champions just makes me like... Ugh, man, I just think this comp sucks, man. Like Ashe, Ziggs, Ezreal... Like one Rakan flank, one they just all get one shot on the spot. Dude, I hate it.
bombard them that way. But at least that pivot would be a lot more consistent with like trying to play against what Vitality are drafting.
It's like they're playing like this comp. Doing. If this was an Aram, I would love that. Ziggs, Ashe, Ezreal, you have like one choke, everyone's just throwing fucking dodgeball, and you can poke and you can lane. But I just think the game is way too.
I really think Liss is a better pick. It can follow up the Vi engage or just go in and bait out ults. Why do Western player don't play much
but
less
anyway,
as
these types of thought
do?
processes aren't going to be...
Lissandra is a really good champ, I agree, but Lissandra is not good against long-range mages like Azir. I think Lissandra is good against things like LeBlanc and Ahri, mages that have to commit to actually get their spells off, but mages that don't have to commit, Lissandra kind of struggles to gap close.
Getting entertained or thought about whatsoever by teams that are obviously playing, so it doesn't make any sense. But if I just put that out there for people wondering like what types of themes and picks could you end up doing in a situation like that. You could also do something unique like go Seraphine here, because Seraphine being able to pair with Ashe, the Ashe W into the
LS
Seraphine
loves his Seraphine.
is just a root, and then this allows you to have a lot more scaling. Seraphine is also a vacuum answer to the Gragas in the sense that Gragas hates playing against enchanters because no matter how he ends up building, no build is actually suitable enough against most enchanter team compositions, and Seraphine scales a lot. So it would primarily be Seraphine AD carry with Ashe support, but you do retain the ability to have Seraphine end up going mid lane, and then you have Ashe AD carry, and you can wait and see how the draft ends up developing. But again, this requires you to utilize
Ashe
flex
AD
picks
carry
and requires
really
you to acknowledge what the opponents are actually drafting, and then respond to it accordingly based on the desires of what the opponent's team composition needs, not what you want to do. But this type of drafting would require more thought processes. Now, obviously, if you have something like Seraphine Jarvan right here, again, you still have a lot of synergy. And this is a much better opening B1, B3 against the very obvious face-up R1, R3 of what
Seraphine
Vitality
Jarvan, I think, is okay, yeah.
But the way
I just don't think
drafting
Ashe...
just makes no sense across the board because it's just inconsistent. Sorry about that, moving the Olaf. It's just really inconsistent, and it doesn't make any sense because not only are they unironically picking a champion into a self-counter, they're also self-countering themselves team comp-wise, and their champions don't make any sense with one another. Either you're making picks, or you're scaling, or you're doing nothing. These champions also all spike at different points when you line up a lot of their goals.
I mean, if you want my opinion on what I think Fnatic should have drafted, just looking at like their players, the current situation, what their strengths are as players, what their weaknesses are as players, and you're giving me the option that Ashe has already been first picked and they have Gragas Xayah. Like, I think if you change your first pick, the whole draft changes, right? So we'll just stick with this. Personally, I think they should definitely pick Sivir. 100% they should pick Sivir. Yeah, I think Sivir Sejuani. I mean, the true draft iterations I would say that they could go through and they could talk about is Sivir Sejuani or Sivir Azir on 2-3, just so they can see Rakan.
Let's go, man.
And that gives them the option on 4-5 to play. What would they play? If they play this, let's do the Sejuani one first. If they play Sivir Sejuani, I think they would still pick Rakan. They would still go for Azir.
Let's go, man.
I'll say that these bans stay the same as well, I guess, because I think Rakan will be picked and they'll probably want Azir anyway. I think personally, I don't know, it depends what Oscar wants to play. I would say Sion or Ornn is okay with it. Sivir Sejuani right now. I would not be too upset about it. And then I think I would maybe look for a Sylas game or something. Or maybe a Yone if he can play it. Because at least Sivir Sejuani Ashe, I think the game is a bit more playable into Xayah Rakan. I just think Ashe Zeri has no pairing. I just don't like it at all. But if you do the Azir draft where you pick Sivir Azir, they'll still pick Rakan, I think. Then you will need to ban things like Akali. And you'd have to change your 4-5 to Akali something ban. And then you'll probably lose Sejuani Vi, and maybe you can still play Jarvan. Or Kindred. I think Kindred would be fine too because you've taken away Azir. And then Sion or Ornn again. Yeah, some kind of tank. Depends how comfortable Razork is on Kindred.
Let's go.
Old costs and whatnot, and they're going to have very different strengths and timing. Whereas the champions on the side of Vitality.
I think the option I would go for is whichever, if either mid or jungle, whoever is easier to sacrifice in draft in terms of champ pool and what they can play is the direction I would go in probably. Like if Razork thinks that if Sejuani and Vi are banned or Sejuani Jarvan, whatever it is, he will struggle to find a pick, then we go Sejuani early. Otherwise we go Azir if Humanoid thinks that he can't play Sylas into a Zero Con or something. Actually, Sylas into this is suicide. Fuck
Pog,
Sylas.
let's go, man.
Could actually not be a bad Kassadin game, you know. As much as I hate Kassadin and dropping mid push, I think Sivir Ashe is a lot more self-sufficient than Zeri Ashe because they can push way faster. So maybe you could play Kassadin, Sejuani, Sivir Ashe, and then your tank
Pog,
top like
let's
Sion.
go, man.
Are going to have much more synergistic timings, and then obviously the R5 still doesn't exist.
Shut up in
a spot like this one, there's also still a lot of possibilities in top lane.
Cállate.
Vitality ended up opting into Camille. I think that you could also end up
I think
going
you're
like
kind of limited with their
Enchanters in
temples.
top lane, and that would be just fine as well because there's no way for this.
I actually wouldn't mind, now that I think
Pog,
about it,
let's go, man.
Ashe, Sivir, Azir,
XDX.
4-5, just look for Poppy Sion or Kindred Sion, Ornn. Something like that I think would work pretty nicely. I actually like Poppy in this draft a lot.
These champions to end up doing anything. Karma's open. You could do probably something like Karma in top lane, and that would be fine, even though.
I hate Karma top lane. I hate it. Especially when the game is all about bot lane and they blind the tank. You just need to pick something that is good and winning in isolation and outscales. You don't need something supportive. I think you just pick Camille is good, Jax is good, Fiora's good, anything. Anything that just wins in isolation, has a good side lane, and can get a lead on its own. I feel like Karma is just going to push top and jack off in the bush.
She doesn't deal damage. I don't think it would matter. You could do something like roaming Janna top lane. You could even do something like Set would probably actually be okay as like a bodyguard, and
Yeah, but the thing is with Karma Ornn, right? When Karma gets her Moonstone, that's it. She kind of either... you have two directions with Karma. One, she just stops farming. Or two, Ornn is just so... Like, Ornn can go even enough that when he's on a side lane, like, there's no threat. Like, what is Karma going to do? Chase him down this fucking lane for 10 minutes trying to kill him? No. If Ornn ever steps up to a side lane against Camille, though, this guy's going to get the shafting treatment.
fucking hate Set, so you know that if I'm saying something like that, it would be all right. You could also do Mordekaiser in top lane, and even though you end up having triple magic damage topside, it's going to be impossible for a lot of these champions to end up getting
Karma
magic
top is good if you have a bit more engage.
Zeri is never going to get magic resistance, neither is Ashe, and if LeBlanc is buying magic resistance in this game, then you've effectively rendered her useless inside of this game, because the whole purpose for her being picked was to be able to follow up on picks, and if she's going something
I like Mordekaiser, mainly because they have LeBlanc, though. Also, Camille, I think that's another reason they picked Camille. They have LeBlanc. Camille is really good against LeBlanc Zeri. Like, it's such a good pick. Because your engage is not super reliable. It's Rakan, Gragas is fine. But now that I think about it more, Camille on 5 here has more to it it wins in isolation, has a stronger side lane, outscales in 1v1, and they're playing against Zeri LeBlanc.
Would be good for Fnatic in your opinion?
Like Mercury Treads,
so
or getting Banshee's Veil, or end up going Zhonya's
makes their life a lot easier. And Mordekaiser kind of has that as well a little bit with
then
flash
you've
hooks.
effectively rendered her useless, and it doesn't matter that Ornn is able to itemize extremely effectively against you. So I just want to point that out there, that even though it's a triple magic damage topside, the reality is that these champions cannot itemize magic resistance effectively without completely gutting their entire reason for being picked. So these types of things I just want to talk about. You could also do stuff like Lilia top lane. In a spot like this, you could do Kayle. Kayle would be really free in a spot like this and would effectively do the same thing. You could also do Ornn in a spot like this. Ornn would be really fine. You could also do Darius, although I wouldn't really recommend Darius. Actually, no, never mind. You can't really do Darius in a spot like this one. Ivern would be another possibility. I think roaming John in top lane is just really, really, really good. Another thing to point out is that this team composition is extremely immobile. And so I think that like champions like Camille with the ability to just push and shove, it is really good.
This comp is immobile? I think in teamfights they're fucking annoying to get on top of.
These types of things are all just, you know, things that should be considered. There's a lot of other top laners that we could continue to like look at, and again, you know, there's just very limited options for what the opponents could do. You could do top Corki in a spot like this one, and there wouldn't be much for the opponents to do. You could do a very historic counter, which is like, you know, Kindred top lane, and there would be nothing for Ornn to do. Kindred is one of Ornn's like really good lane counters. Another champion that you could do in top lane that would be really effective would be Nasus, because of his value against Vi, Zeri, and
Nasus
Ashe.
Sounds okay.
Because Nasus would basically go completely untouched.
I think
in this game.
like the focus is too much on like lane phase and 1v1
of the game. His Wither would have a lot of value. Nasus being farmed up in a game like this would just be an utter disaster for the opponents. So there's so many options.
Hans Solo actually paying teams to not ban his Draven.
Shut up.
on R5 that could just be picked that completely render Fnatic's comp useless, and this is just really showing how they have absolutely no idea what they're drafting. They don't even know how to draft. They don't even probably know what day of the week it is. Probably don't even spell Fnatic. They actually probably spell it the way that the word Fnatic is actually spelled. So that is it for the mini draft kingdom of Fnatic's absolutely useless draft skill. And I hope that you enjoyed it, because I did not enjoy watching it. And yeah, I mean, Vitality just absolutely annihilated them in the draft phase. Whether or not Vitality was thinking about anything that was going on, I actually don't think that's the case, because, again, they open R1, R2, Gragas, Xayah. This is punishable with the opening that Fnatic went for, but then Fnatic blunders B2, B3, effectively rewarding the R1, R2 of Vitality. And we already talked about some of the ways that Fnatic can get a lead on, I don't know what that was. We already talked about the ways that Fnatic can get a lead on B2, B3 inside of the draft and then retain some flex options while also responding to what Vitality was doing on R1, R2. But they didn't do any of that, so that is pretty much it. Anyways, yeah, that'll be on YouTube. Probably on Clips channel or something. You guys can see it there.
Cool video.